Welcome to this explainer on models to achieve global justice, where we'll explore how abstract philosophical theories actually translate into binding treaties, which is absolutely crucial because it determines exactly what wealthy nations owe to the global poor.
So if you're serious about understanding how high-level philosophy transforms into real, on-the-ground treaty machinery, you're in exactly the right place. We're going to map out the expanding circle of global justice together, starting with some pretty modest duties and working our way all the way up to binding international laws. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the baseline of global justice, expand the global obligation, look at capabilities in global governance, compare human rights with communitarians, check out some practical mechanisms in action, and finish up by operationalizing justice with a deep seabed case study.
Okay, part one, the baseline of global justice. We're kicking things off with the most bounded and, frankly, modest obligations out there. These were proposed by the political philosopher John Rawls back in 1999 in his Law of Peoples. He laid out 8 principles to govern how nations relate to one another. Now, while they cover the basics, self-defense, honoring treaties, I want you to really focus your attention on that last principle: assisting burdened societies. Basically, Rawls believed that wealthy nations only need to help struggling societies reach a basic level of self-sufficiency. He explicitly rejected the idea that we need to achieve total global financial equality.
Think of it like this. Imagine you're helping a neighbor rebuild their house after a really bad storm. Once their house is livable, secure, and they can finally manage on their own, well, your job is done. You don't stick around to make sure their house is exactly as luxurious as yours, right? The precise legal term for this is the duty of assistance. It's a strict baseline of self-sufficiency that is completely devoid of any mandate for ongoing global equality.
Moving right along to part 2, expanding the global obligation. Let's see how other thinkers expand that circle of duty. So while Rawls stops at that basic floor of self-sufficiency, cosmopolitan thinkers, people like Charles Beats and Thomas Pogge, push for a continuous, ongoing obligation. To them, national borders are basically just arbitrary lines drawn on a map. Because of that, the ultimate goal isn't just basic survival, the goal is global equality. In this model, inequalities are only permitted if they actually benefit the absolute worst-off people globally.
To actually operationalize this idea, Pogge argues that a government's control over resource-rich territory is essentially just a geographic lottery. So to level the playing field, we should apply a tiny tax on every single barrel of oil pumped or every ton of copper mined worldwide. This proposed mechanism has a specific name: the Global Resources Dividend. It's a fund designed to directly correct that arbitrary resource inequality.
Now, Peter Singer approaches this from a totally different angle. Just imagine you're walking past a shallow pond and you see a drowning child. You would absolutely wade in to save them, even if it completely ruins your expensive shoes, right? The cost to you is just a ruined pair of shoes. The benefit to the child is life itself. No one in their right mind would argue that you should just keep walking to save your shoes.
We anchor this powerful analogy to the precise utilitarian rule: physical distance from suffering does not reduce your strict obligation to prevent it. Under the utilitarian model, our obligations aren't based on shared citizenship or borders or institutions. They're based entirely on preventing suffering. If you can prevent something very bad from happening, at little cost to yourself, you absolutely must do it. So, under this rule, a starving child on another continent commands the exact same moral duty from you as that drowning child right in front of you.
All right, part 3, capabilities and global governance. Let's shift gears from measuring justice with money to measuring it by actual human experience. Unlike Rawls and Pogge, who focus heavily on redistributing money, Amartya Sen and Martha Nussbaum completely reframe the goal using what's called the capabilities model. They argue that justice isn't really about resources at all. It's about real freedoms. Think about it. A bicycle is a great resource, but it's totally useless to someone who doesn't have the physical capability or the freedom of movement to actually ride it. So justice asks, what are people actually capable of doing and being? This framework is incredibly influential. In fact, it directly underlies the UN's Human Development Index that we still use today.
Now, to actually manage these expanding freedoms, justice requires what David Held calls cosmopolitan democracy. This means creating multi-layered global governance with genuine democratic accountability at every single step, rather than just relying on unelected bureaucracies. This accountability has to scale up sequentially. It starts at the local town level, moves to nations, then regions, right up to the global level. It's all about ensuring that global institutions aren't just great powers bargaining behind closed doors.
Let's jump into Part 4, Human Rights versus Communitarians. How do we actually enforce these freedoms?
We do it through the most institutionally embedded model we have, human rights. Starting with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, we see this evolve into strict legal commitments by 1966 with two major covenants. One covers civil and political rights like voting and free speech. The other covers economic, social, and cultural rights like labor and education. This is no longer pure philosophy, guys. It's a tangible framework where all states must respect and fulfill a minimum set of universal rights for every single human being.
But we definitely have to address the countermodel here. Communitarians, like Michael Walzer, push back on this universal idea pretty hard. They argue that justice is inherently tied to a bounded political community with a shared history. Because of that, they say, we don't owe robust distributive justice to strangers across the world. Instead, we only owe them humanitarian assistance during a crisis. It's a very precise, deliberate limitation on global duty.
Moving on to Part 5, Practical Mechanisms in Action.
Let's pull out of theory for a second and look at the actual practical mechanisms being used right now to bridge these gaps. These translate theory into measurable targets. First, we have the UN target for wealthy nations to donate 0.7% of their income to aid. Second, we have special and differential treatment, which basically means writing different, more lenient trade rules for developing nations. Third is common but differentiated responsibilities, which acknowledges that since wealthy nations caused most historical pollution, they have to bear heavier climate burdens. And finally, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which is literally the most comprehensive attempt we have to map justice into measurable targets up to the year 2030.
And finally, Part 6, Operationalizing Justice, Deep Seabed. Let's look at a complete case study.
The UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS, is our master case study for seeing global justice turned into treaty machinery. Here are the facts. It revolves around a grand bargain, where maritime powers traded their navigation freedoms in exchange for coastal states getting expanded territorial rights. The legal issue here was distributive justice. Who exactly owns the vast resources at the absolutely pitch-black bottom of the ocean? The holding was the creation of a brand new legal mechanism to ensure shared ownership. And why does this matter? Because it literally takes the lofty ideals of cosmopolitanism and codifies them into hard, enforceable treaty law.
The crucial point here is this specific mechanism, which ensures the deep seabed is treated as a shared resource. It perfectly embodies the cosmopolitan principle in real life. It's formally called the common heritage of mankind. Under this principle, the deep seabed doesn't just belong to whoever gets there first with the most expensive submarines. It belongs to everyone. In fact, the International Seabed Authority was created specifically to administer benefit sharing from deep seabed mining. This right here is global justice machinery in action.
Let's quickly recap our journey today. We started by expanding from Rawls' basic floor, pushed for equality with Pag and Singer, shifted to Sen's capabilities, and explored multi-layered governance. Then we contrasted universal human rights with the communitarian counter-model, and finally saw justice operationalized in the law of the sea. Make sure you have these precise terms down in your notes: the duty of assistance, the global resources dividend, cosmopolitan democracy, humanitarian assistance limits, and the common heritage of mankind.
I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought to chew on. If we have actually built these binding frameworks to ensure justice, why does such massive global inequality still persist today? Is the core flaw in our philosophical models, or is it just a failure of enforcement in the actual machinery we've built? I highly encourage you to review the specific legal mechanisms we covered today and ask yourself how they might be strengthened. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.